Hello everyone, in today's episode of Project Honda Civic Si, I'll be installing front and rear alignment kits courtesy of SPC Performance. Okay, so when it comes to doing vehicle alignments, a lot of times cars only have a limited amount of factory adjustability in the alignment, whether it's toe, camber, caster, whatever it may be. So there are many companies that offer various solutions for a lot of different cars out there, and one of those names is SPC Performance. I've used SPC parts before on previous cars. I've never had an issue. The thing I like about SPC is that they are an OEM supplier. SPC works directly with the manufacturer on a lot of different companies to kind of develop parts for the car, whether it's for an OEM application or a sort of aftermarket, more performance-oriented one. So with that out of the way, let me show you what's inside these boxes. All right, let's start with these little guys first. This is SPC part number 81260. These are adjustable camber bolts for the front suspension. Two per side, so you need one box for each side, 2 boxes total. Basically, these bolts replace the standard bolts in the front struts of this Honda Civic, and they offer adjustable camber. I'll show you how this works in a second, but that's what these little guys are. These are adjustable camber bolts by SPC. In this bigger box here, bust these guys open. This is an adjustable rear camber arm for the Civic Si. Now basically, in stock form, this generation Honda Civic has no rear camber adjustment built into it from the factory. All you can adjust is the toe and the rear suspension. And for a bone stock car that just drives around to and from work every day, that's quite alright. But when you're going to the racetrack, you need to adjust your alignment to get better tire wear and better performance. The stock components just do not work very well. So SPC offers these adjustable camber arms. They offer 2 different variants, which I will touch on later. This is one of them. It's very simple. It just replaces the upper arm and the rear suspension with a threaded piece. It's adjustable, so you can pull it in or out to adjust your camber. With that out of the way, let's dive into a bit of a tech talk. Okay, inside the garage now. Don't mind the M key box. That's a hint of things to come. But I wanted to talk a bit more in depth about these SPC rear adjustable camber arms. Now, I mentioned it in the intro, but SPC actually makes 2 versions of this adjustable rear arm for the Civic Si. They make this one, which is the standard one that uses hardened solid rubber bushings inside there and in there. They also make an adjustable rear arm that has spherical bearings instead of rubber. The premise being those spherical bearings offer smoother articulation, less binding in rear suspension, and in theory, better performance from the rear suspension. They're also made of aluminum, I believe, versus these standard arms are made of stamped steel. But the thing is, if you look at the prices for these 2 components online, there's a very drastic difference in both the pricing and the way they're built. They look totally different. So rather coincidentally, I happened to get a good deal on a used set of these SPC spherical rear arms. So I wanted to do some basic comparisons because the internet doesn't actually have that much information on the explicit differences between these 2 options. The spherical bearing one and the standard stamped steel hardened rubber bushing item. I figured I already bought these and I planned on using these, but when the deal on these came up, I couldn't pass up on the opportunity to kind of see what the real differences actually are. So trying not to mind the messy workstation here, but here is the difference between the SPC aluminum spherical bearing rear camber arm and the standard stamped steel hardened rubber bushing rear camber arm, excuse me. Okay, design-wise, they're very similar in principle. Basically, you can't deviate too much from it because it's how the car works, but it bolts into the chassis side here, and it bolts into the rear knuckle right through here. Camber adjustment is done the same way via a threaded rod here. Pull it in for more negative camber, out for less negative camber. Both supposedly offer plus or minus 3 degrees of camber from wherever your car is currently at. And both use the same locking mechanism here to make sure this does not slip or move. Okay, now from there, obviously you start to see differences in design. Aluminum, stamped steel. There are cutouts here, presumably to reduce weight, versus these are just solid stamped steel. And obviously, sealed spherical bearing versus hardened rubber. Though at first pass, they actually do look identical. If you just looked at these, you wouldn't actually know this is a spherical unit versus a hardened rubber unit. And obviously, even by hand, there's no deflection in that. I get a little bit deflection from this hardened rubber bushing, but not nearly as much. Of course, this is all kind of conjecture. What about some actual hard numbers? So in order to see, like presumably the biggest reason why you're buying this is for the weight savings, because although that sealed spherical bearing is nice in the rear suspension, to be frank, the rear suspension of the car on the front wheel drive car just isn't doing that much work. So I'm not sure how much gain you're going to see with a spherical bearing versus hardened rubber, but I think there might be a big difference in terms of weight. Because that's definitely going to affect the way that the rear suspension works, how well it can articulate, how freely it can move, and how nicely it all works together. So in order to weigh these guys, because they're so small and so light, a typical household scale does not work, I went and bought a food scale. Now, of course, a food scale is not meant to weigh suspension components, so I had to do a little bit of modification and use this handy bowl. So let's zero this guy out. And let's start off with the standard stamped steel SPC arm. Definitely kind of a clumsy operation here, but there we go. Okay, so the stamped steel SPC arm weighs in at 3 pounds, 15.2 ounces. So just a sneeze under 4 pounds. Pretty light, all things considered, for a stamped steel piece completely solid all the way through. Now, you're going to assume that this, being aluminum, it's hollowed out in the sides and sort of like dimple dyed and all that, it should be much lighter, right? Well, I guess we're going to find out. So 3 pounds, 15.2 ounces. Near as makes a difference, 4 pounds all in. Let's weigh this guy. The aluminum arm with the dimple dies cut through it and all that weighs in 3 pounds, 8.7 ounces. So your total weight savings is 6.5 ounces exactly. But granted, there are two, one for each side of the car. So you're saving a total of 13 ounces, which is about 0.75 of a pound, going from these to these. So maybe if you're in an all-out time attack car where every ounce literally counts, it's gonna be worth the extra $100 and some to go with these, in addition to these spherical bearings. But if you are a more budget-minded consumer and a more budget-minded enthusiast like I am, I think these standard pieces will do the job just fine. Hello there, I'm back, this time with the stock rear control arm on this car. Don't worry, I'll be filming the DIY on the other side. It's very simple, very straightforward. It took about 5 minutes to remove out of the car. But I just wanted to show you the differences, kind of comparing the three. Let me orient them all the same. Okay, so this is the upper link of Civic Si rear suspension. Obviously not designed to be adjustable from the factory. Indeed, the rear trailing arm is the only sort of camber adjust, or the only sort of toe adjustment built into the rear suspension. As you can see, it's obviously replaced with this threaded piece, which gives you upper adjustability for camber adjustment. Principle, very similar, bolts in the knuckle here, bolts in the chassis here. Kind of the same double eyelet suspension solution here. This bushing here on the knuckle side is also solid rubber, which is quite nice for an OEM, no voided bushing there. However, this side, on the chassis side, is a voided bushing design. You see there are gaps in the rubber there. It offers a lot of compliance. You can move that by hand, let alone the weight of the car and the movement of the wheels. So obviously these stiffer new bushings will be a notable upgrade there. But I did want to weigh it as well, just for more perspective on what you're getting when you upgrade your rear suspension arms. So I have my scale zeroed out again with my patented bowl solution. And we're going to put the stock arm in there. Wow, 3 pounds, 11.4 ounces. So all three of these arms, from stock to OE replacement stamped steel to spherical bearing, dimple die, aluminum, they're all within just a few ounces of each other in terms of weight. That's actually pretty impressive. I'm actually impressed with how light this stock arm is, though you'll notice it's actually two pieces welded together here. It's like totally hollow here, versus this replacement arm is totally solid. Okay, so with the weighing and measurements out of the way, I'm going to show you how to remove this camber arm on the other side of the car and go through the installation process. Okay, so pulling out the stock rear camber arm is pretty simple. I actually decided to film the passenger side first, because it's actually the slightly more complicated side, just because the exhaust is in the way. Now, some instructions will say to remove the axle back exhaust. I don't think that's really necessary. You just need a short enough socket to kind of get to this bolt over here, just because the exhaust can get in the way. The only thing you're going to need is a 14 mil for all three bolts. I recommend using a breaker bar. None of these should be on that tight, just kind of expedites things. This is a captive nut, so all you have to do is just loosen up this hex head over here. Again, 14 mil. All right, now that we have that started, there are two bolts here that go into the chassis side. And this is where you might need your shorter 14 mil socket if you've got it. Otherwise, you can just drop the axle back. It's not hard to do, it just takes a few minutes. There we go. We're on there, look at that, we're on. There we go. Okay, so reassembly is the opposite of removal, as you know, but this being an adjustable arm means that you need to set it before you install it. In this case, just for the sake of getting us to the alignment shop, I just set this the same length as the OEM arm I just took out, and then all you have to do is bolt it into the chassis here, put a jack onto the hub to jack the hub up to ride height, or close to what ride height should look like, and then bolt it back together. And that wraps up the adjustable rear camber arms. Obviously tighten down these lock nuts before you drive away. And now we can go to the front of the car. So I'm not sure if these SPC camber bolts are very slightly oversized, but the cammed portion, a portion that helps give you all the additional negative camber, was a very, very tight fit in here. I actually had to use the ratcheting force of the nut to help pull it through, otherwise it was just stuck. I mean, I was hammering on this bolt trying to get it to go through, no go. I had to crank it down, 18 mil on this side, 15 mil on this side, very strange, different from stock, and just crank down this nut to help pull the bolt through. Very annoying, but this side is now done. Hello everyone, I'm on the road with Project Civic SI. It's been a few days since I installed the full SPC alignment kit, and I actually just wrapped up an alignment with my friends at West End Alignment in Gardena, California. West End is a very prominent race preparation and alignment shop in the greater Southern California area, and I try to take my cars to them as much as possible. But anyway, the wizards at West End were able to get negative 2.75 degrees of camber in the front end of this car with those SPC camber bolts. And then as a result of that, we commonly agreed to set the rear end of the car at negative 2.25 degrees of camber, zero toe all around, and in case anyone's curious, the car has about 6.5 degrees of caster. Obviously the SPC rear arms have a lot more adjustment in them. I believe at my current ride height, the car could be around as much as negative 4 degrees of rear camber if I ever needed that much. But yes, in an otherwise stock car with OE style struts, no camber plates or anything like that, the SPC alignment kit was able to give me a very much improved range of static negative camber, which should hopefully really improve tire wear and tire performance in general, just because before the lack of negative camber especially in the front suspension was really hard on those front tires. It really hurt the shoulders of the tires, and so hopefully this kind of improves the actual contact patch, how much the tires are actually staying glued to the pavement under cornering. And that is all I've got for this episode of Project Civic SI. Please stay tuned for the next episode where I am back at the track trying to go very fast indeed. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye.